ADHD Rewired, episode 549. Since 2014, this has been the podcast for ADHD adults who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. You can learn about our coaching and accountability groups, our virtual co-working community, and more. All at ADHDrewired.com. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Learn more about our offerings, including our monthly live Q&As, get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter, and more. All at ADHDrewired.com. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Hey, before we dive into today's conversation, our summer coaching groups start July 24th, and you could save $200 when you sign up at our registration kickoff event on June 18th. Spots do fill up quickly, so learn more and get on our interest list at the website or go directly to coachingrewired.com. Also, today's conversation with Shannon Palma is actually going to be a two-part episode, but you actually don't need to listen to them together because they're kind of separate topics. Both were recorded, though, on March 5th, 2025. Now, I was hoping to get out this episode during April for Autism Awareness Month, but I'm continuing to choose to prioritize sustainable energy practices in my life. And at least for this season of my life, my plan is to continue releasing episodes as I am able. I am prioritizing my work energy on running our coaching groups and alumni community, my one-on-one client work, all while trying to not work more than 32 hours a week. Because while I've continued to make slow but fairly consistent progress in healing my burnout, I know I have to be mindful of my energy. And like I tell the members of our coaching groups, progress is often slower than we wish, and wherever we're trying to get to, we probably wish we were there yesterday. But wishing healing or growth would happen faster has never made it so. If you are new here, I'm really glad that you are here. And if you're interested in hearing a bit more of my journey through burnout, you might be interested in going back just a couple episodes where I talk about that. These last few weeks has also been challenging for some different reasons. 2 weeks ago, my 95-year-old grandmother passed away. And my dad was in the ICU with pneumonia, an infected shunt that drains fluid from his brain, which he had to have after his brain surgery about 30 years ago when he had an aneurysm in his brainstem. He was in ICU. He had liver failure, which he now has to be on dialysis for. He was out of the hospital, then put into a skilled nursing home where they were going to monitor him while he gets dialysis for about a month. And then in between the time that I started writing this intro and recording it, my dad fell at his skilled nursing facility, hit his head, and put him back in the ICU. And with all this happening, I've also had a few interactions with my mother, who, while I haven't really talked about this on the podcast at this point, I've chosen to cut contact with about 2 years ago. And as difficult as all of this has been, I'm actually really grateful that I've been able to take the time to grieve. I allowed myself to cancel last month's Pomodoro dance party in adult study hall that I hold every month. I've taken some extra time off, and I didn't just try to distract myself with work, which I have come to realize is exactly what I used to do. I also realized that grief and burnout feel real similar. And while different, if there's one thing that I have learned over the last few years during my own healing journey, ignoring the hard stuff in life just makes life harder. And when we sweep enough of life's messes under the rug, we'll eventually end up tripping over a lumpy rug. I know it's cliche, but healing really is a journey, and growth never is a straight path. So wherever you are in your path, I hope that you're being kind and loving towards yourself. And whatever you're going through, you really are not alone. And if you're looking to join a supportive growth community, we'll have more information about our summer coaching groups at the break or at coachingrewired.com. Or if you are looking for one-on-one support, I do currently have one opening for one-on-one coaching for clients worldwide, or one-on-one therapy if you are in the state of Illinois. Learn more about one-on-one services at ADHDrewired.com/services. Okay, now for my conversation with Shannon Palma. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Dr. Shannon Palma. Dr. Palma is the founder and CEO of ITI Assistive Technologies, a disability-led company creating innovative support tools for neurodivergent adults. After receiving her autism and ADHD diagnosis in her 40s, she transformed her decades of personal experience with executive function challenges into practical solutions for her community. A former professor, she understands firsthand the cost of navigating life without appropriate supports. She continues her advocacy work as co-founder and co-executive director of ASR, supporting neurodivergent adults. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to be here.
It was funny when before we hit record, we were just like catching up a little bit. And I was like, and I kept going, wait, we should actually talk about this on the podcast. So I kept sort of like stopping what we were talking about because it seemed like everything we were talking about seemed to probably be very relevant for what this conversation, I think, will unfold to be. So you got diagnosed in your 40s and you look 35. So how old are you?
Bless you for that. I'm 47.
Okay, so you're 47.
Yes.
What led you to get diagnosed?
There were a number of things. Like I had been questioning since I was a child. My cousin was diagnosed when we were kids. And I was like, why does he have Asperger's? And I'm just smart. Like he's smart. His voice was had some of the atypicality in his speech. And mine was like, I would just do accents and funny voices and things like that. But I sounded within the typical register. So I don't know if that was it. I don't know. Girls weren't diagnosed in the 70s, 80s. So certainly in the 70s. I'd always been curious and I hadn't checked. Like I'd read the DSM-5 guidelines and I've read the various versions of the DSM guidelines multiple times and been like, it's almost right. Yep. I didn't know that like how to, I was taking it very literally and I was like, I don't care about trains. Numbers do not, and like I don't care about these very specific stereotypical things that the examples are giving. So therefore I must not be autistic. And then my nieces were both diagnosed ADHD and like off the charts. And my roommate at the time had just had an ADHD diagnosis and she kept saying, you know how your brain like gets a dopamine hit when you finish something? My brain doesn't do that. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, oh. And then I thought she was talking about like the satisfaction of checking a box. And I was like, but I love checking the box. I put things on my to-do list just to check the box. Is that a dopamine hit? I don't know. I was so confused.
Yeah.
So I kept asking my therapist, I was like, are you sure? She said, I don't think you're diagnosable with anything because you have to show deficits and all of this if it hasn't impacted your life negatively. And then I read a romance novel by an autistic woman. And this was like after getting an anxiety diagnosis and like really being like, something is wrong with me. It's not in a pathologizing way, but I need help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading a romance novel and it was Helen Huang's, and I don't know if I'm saying her name right, Kissing Quotient. But there's this moment in the book where the heroine is trying to determine whether the hero loves her. And so she looks at the data and she's an econometrician and she's okay. According to the data, men stop buying their own underwear when they're in a relationship. So if I buy him underwear and he wears them, then he's in love with me. If he doesn't wear them, then he's not. That's the pattern in the data. And that made perfect sense to me. Yes, when listen to people figure out feelings. And then I thought about it and I was like, oh, wait, I don't think I've ever seen that before in a book. That's my thought process. I mean, not underwear, but that is how I think about things. Like I look at patterns and I try and match people's behaviors to the patterns I've seen in media or in books. That's how I figure out how people are feeling. That's me. And there was other stuff, like had some sensory sensitivity and stuff like that. And I was like, that's me too. I had heard about sensory like integration disorders and things like that, but no one ever explained what it was.
What are some of your sensory things?
Oh God, I'm hyposensitive to touch.
Okay.
So if there's light pressure, it feels like ants are crawling over my skin and I can't stand it. It has to be like deep pressure or getting the heebie-jeebies. and I'm hypersensitive to sound. And a lot of times when I get overloaded by sound, then it starts to feel like I experience it as touch. So it makes my skin crawl.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of synesthesia, but like nobody tells you like what it's like to hear something.
It's an idea of like, how do we know we're all seeing red in the same way?
There'd be these like high pitched noises sometimes, like my whole life, like a
Mm-hmm.
high pitched noise. And I'd be like, no one else is paying any attention to this. So I am not going to pay attention
I
to this.
can't even tell you how many times or there's some
Yes.
sound that is driving me crazy. And people are like, what are you talking about? Like, what, you don't hear that? Because it is literally like, it is internal into my bones at this point.
Yes. And it is painful. And yes. So like I knew I was just really moody. I thought like that sometimes I would go like every holiday. Even if I was really excited about the holiday, I'd go be around my family and I'll let them know I'd be in a terrible mood and not want to talk to anybody and want to hide. So like, I thought all of that was just, I was a jerk. Like I was smart and a jerk. And I got a lot of reinforcement for that. And then I read this book. I immediately went online and found a site that had some of the like psychological assessments. And I took 8 clinically validated psychological assessments. They all came back autistic. I read a book by like how to read the DSM-5 criteria for not literally read what they're intended to test, not like whether you like trains. And I was like, oh, because I don't care about trains.
Yeah.
But they were like, do they arrange things? And I'm like, no, I'm totally like, I didn't arrange things. I just rearranged my books every time I was stressed my entire life. I came up with my own Dewey Decimal System and things like that. And that's what I did when I was like 12 years old or 11 years old.
And do you still remember like your system?
I don't, because I had to keep changing it because the label maker that I had, they stopped making that kind of tape. So then I had to redo all of it because they weren't going to match.
I totally get that.
And then I was like, maybe I have a better way. So maybe I can do this other. Now I just arrange my books by color.
That's like the new thing too, by the way. And I see those bookshelves and I always love bookshelves. And like, I'm like, it looks so nice, but it's so not practical. Because why are you going to have your book you have one area of your bookshelf that there's so many different topics in this corner of the bookshelf. It just happens to be colored the same way. My brain's, yes, it looks nice, but it's not, doesn't make sense.
For me, I did it in 2008 after my dad died. And I was in like massive burnout, skill regression, like the whole thing. And one night I just stayed up late. I was waiting to find out if my cat was dying. I was trying to decide if I needed to go to emergency vet, which I did. But I was like waiting to see because they'd already sent me home once and told me I was paranoid. And I was like, well, I can't offend the veterinarian. So I was just rearranging my books and I put them all by color. And it was visually it's a STEM thing. Like it calmed my brain in a way that I had never been able to find the perfect thematic or alphabetical system.
It's funny. As I'm hearing you, like, on one hand, I'm like, God, that would drive me crazy because I want my like ADHD books to be with my ADHD books, and I want my relationship books to be with my relationship books. And I'm thinking, ooh, do I have time to rearrange my bookshelf after this? Because the color thing sounds nice. Because I used to rearrange stuff all the time. I don't know why I haven't done that in a while, but I used to do it a lot. Like anytime, it was basically my favorite activity to do when I was actually putting off doing something I really needed to do.
Yes. Not to say there's anything genetic about autism or ADHD, but my mom is in early stages of dementia and she rearranged her living room 14 times last week.
Oh, all in a week.
All in a week. Yes. And it's not the first time.
Was it because did she forget that she had done it the previous 13? It
No,
just wasn't quite the way she wanted it.
She's done that my whole life. She's rearranged the furniture.
It is genetic though. Like we do know that it is genetic.
Oh, it's totally genetic. It's totally genetic. Yeah, I was being sarcastic. Yeah, my grandmother didn't speak until she was 5. Come on.
Yeah, that's
a little bit of a tell. Yeah. She like bought 9 3/4 acres of woods in the North Georgia mountains, built a passive solar house, and covered every surface in books. And there were books piles as tall as I am on every
Wow.
surface. No, couldn't possibly be genetic.
Do you think that part of that, like seeing that kind of those traits in your family,
Mhm.
almost like made you think my weirdness is normal?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That is what it was. I was just very grandma. So I would say my mom's probably undiagnosed ADHD, but grandma was 100% autistic. Every sign is there.
Mm.
But I was like her. So why would that be? And I think actually me being a girl, because I was so much like my grandmother, like my male cousin didn't slide under the radar because he wasn't like grandma. Like he was a
Mm.
different presentation than grandma. But 100%, like when I started writing down I wrote a 37-page document before I went to my therapist to ask her again. I was like, here's the DSM-5's criteria, and here are data points from 40 plus years of my life fitting each one. What do you
Mm.
think? The ADHD diagnosis was secondary to that because when I was once I was like, oh yeah, autism, that does make sense. But I also it's that constant tension of the AuDHD, like
Mm-hmm.
where you need stimulation and you need newness, but you also need routine and you need stability. And it's which part of the neurotype is ascendant. At any point in time, you're
Yeah.
going to be a drastically different, almost different person, depending on that. And not in the sense of it changes fundamentally who you are, but it does change your capacity and what you're able to do and keep doing. And I had been very ADHD ascendant for a long time, mainly because I was so burnt out that like my higher brain functions were not going.
Let's talk about burnout for a moment. I think we were sharing
Oh,
this before
yeah.
we hit record, and I was like, "This is really good. Let's get this on the podcast here." So you had shared that like you took Monday off, I think, because you're feeling burnt
Mhm.
out. And I said, "What's the difference between just like, feeling burnt out from a day versus feeling burnt out like overall?" And then you said a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff. I was like, "Oh, that's good." So what was that stuff that you said?
Okay, well, that's that. I'm going to add, I do think like it goes for me, it's not just like purely autistic burnout because I've got the ADHD component. So I can leverage myself way past my actual limits
Mhm.
and think that I'm going to be fine. I'm not fine. So, like, I'm a foster parent. Thursday, my kids had a lot of appointments. So I took them out of school at 1. We went to the pediatrician, and then we went to meet the social worker. And then we went to meet one of them's therapist. And then we came home and had video visits with dad and then with mom. Then we went to sleep.
Oh.
We got up the next morning. We got their blood drawn. We had breakfast. We went to the dentist. I dropped them off at school. I went to a meeting, and then they had a school day. It just went. So I can do that. I can just follow the schedule. I have no thoughts.
Mm.
There's no internal monologue. I'm a machine. I just follow it. I follow the schedule. And I've done this. Like, this is how I've lived most of my life pre-diagnosis. And I just go until I fall down. And I'm not making lots of intentional choices when I'm doing that. I'm just doing the next thing that's on the list.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not on the list, it doesn't happen. So that's where, when I think about burnout, I also think about that because I will push really hard and override my limits and get closer to like true burnout than I ever would want to be. The way I distinguish between like just being daily and like daily, oh yeah, I'm getting burnt. When I say burnt out, really what I mean is like my nervous system is really dysregulated.
Yeah.
And I have to do a reset because I am headed for a shutdown or a meltdown, or I'm already in a shutdown or a meltdown, handing my acupuncturist a note because I can't talk to him. And, or just huddled on the couch telling the kids, I'm sorry, you've got to this is what you can make for dinner. Like, people, I can't. The amount of adrenaline I would need to get up and do something would be like, we should be going to the hospital. Like, in an emergency, I can make myself function, but the cost is going to be really high.
Say again, though, autistic burnout being different from like occupational
Yes.
burnout.
Yeah.
Was that difference between what? Say it again.
So autistic burnout is more serious than that. So that's just like what I would call like regular nervous system dysregulation. Autistic burnout is cumulative, and it's a combination of persistent cognitive load, cumulative cognitive load that's just frying those circuits. It's and there's some other factors. Aspire, the autism academic, it's like the research partnership. I can't remember the whole thing. Like they did a study on autistic burnout. They determined that it is differentiated from occupational burnout, so like work burnout, and from like chronic fatigue and depression. It's something different, and it's a mismatch between what you're expected to be able to do and what you can actually do. And big part of that is like when we talk about autistic skill regression, ADHD is so related that there's a lot of similarity, but you aren't capable of the same things that you would be. It's a dynamic disability. So sometimes your brain is able to put in the extra effort to do things. And then sometimes your brain, there's no extra anything. So you can't bridge the gaps in that kind of developmental disability. Like the synapses there's not that extra effort to give. Yeah. So it's a mismatch between capacity and expectations.
Or ability and capacity.
And ability. And And that actually, like the research that my company was doing supports this 100%. We were looking at how AI-powered supports could improve well-being for neurodivergent people, autistic and ADHD adults. And we were looking at the impact of decision fatigue and paralysis. Yes. And cumulative cognitive load, basically, and how to reduce that. And we did these focus groups on well-being because we wanted to actually talk to autistic and ADHD adults and be like, we think well-being looks different for us. There's something different in it because we have this fluctuating dynamic disability. So how are we gonna define it? I could look up the exact definition that we came with, but it's basically knowing how your actions and decisions and all of the rest impact your inner balance, and then taking actions in line with staying balanced. And when we did the focus groups, every single person said it's not about knowledge. It's capacity to act on knowledge. I know all the right things that I should be doing. I have studied them. I have looked them up. I've done the research. I know what I should do. I cannot do it. And that's the problem.
You were talking about, you mentioned like just doing a reset.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the book, The 5 Resets?
No. That sounds interesting.
So cause I'm just getting past this point of burnout because I had gone through some pretty significant burnout. And so I'm right now, so much of my focal sort of energy is about managing energy to put more space between where I am now and where I was with my burnout. One of the things in this book that there was a term that was just, we need to talk more about this just in our community. If people ask me, what's my superpower? I would say resilience. Like I'm a lemonade maker. I can give me lemons, I'll turn them into lemonade. But she has this term that she called toxic resilience.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, that would describe my last like 2.5 to 3 years.
Yeah.
This is not a convenient time to take a break, even though I know I am burnt out. So I'm going to push down and just push it down and just keep moving forward. And it's like that. Sometimes when we hear a certain phrase or word and you're just like, that's it. And just this realization that like with all superpowers, we have our kryptonite. And just recognizing that has been a really helpful sort of framework. It's great. Resilience is great. And I think it's super important. And for ADHD, I always tell people like, let go of consistency, focus on resilience.
Yes.
Like you're going to slip. It's okay. Get back up. But we also need more nuance on this too, I think. Because it's okay, get back up. But like, how many times are you going to get back up? There has to be a point when you're metaphorically bruised and bloody. Maybe you should just stay down for a while.
Yeah. You can break.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us do.
Yeah.
The suicide rates for autistic adults and ADHD adults are terrible. They're so disproportionately high. For autistic women, it's 13 times higher.
Yeah.
Because we push ourselves. Like what you learn, if you learn to mask. So especially if you're late diagnosed, If you learn to mask, what you're really learning to do is ignore your limits until you actually collapse. So it's the difference between maintaining a bridge and just saying, hey, we're going to see what's going to happen until it falls and kills everybody that was on it. What we do is we just hope it'll stay intact. And then every so often our lives implode.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had that happen. The first time that I remember like a really extreme burnout, I was like 12.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my 20s, I was just pretty persistently burned out. I just didn't know that I was in burnout. Again, I was just like leveraging that ADHD motor. Like, that they say it's like you have a motor and you can't stop. I was just like hit stop. So I'm just going to keep going and going and going. And about once or twice a month, I would collapse. And then I would get up and I would go and go and go and then collapse.
And you said like in your 20s this was happening. And I also think that in our 20s, if you're pursuing advanced education, like stress is considered like the status symbol, right? We're all going through this, right? But are we really? And are we really going through it in quite the same way? I remember being in grad school and I was just doing grad school and I had my internship. And there were these parents who were students in the program who also had outside jobs. And I was just like, how in the hell are you doing that? Because I'm sleeping 2 hours a night, just to try to keep up. Oh, man.
Yeah. When you learn to ignore your body, bad things result. But you don't actually, because you've learned to ignore your body, you can't tell.
Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to let's talk a little bit about what we were talking about before we record when I was sharing with you that I just recently had an evaluation for autism.
Oh, yeah.
We will be right back. Support for this podcast comes from ADHD Rewired's coaching and accountability groups and alumni membership community. Since 2014, we've had the privilege of serving over 1,200 ADHDers just like you, who, whether you know what you should be doing, but can't seem to do it, or you just recently learned that you have ADHD and want to learn how to better work with your ADHD brain, you are not alone, and you definitely are not broken. Our summer coaching groups that you can learn more about at coachingrewired.com are designed for folks just like us. It's not about quick fixes or gimmicks or fast hacks. It's about real accountability, structured support, and a community and a coach who truly get it. Join us 3 times a week for 8 weeks with daily accountability for your top 3 tasks, weekly accountability for your top weekly goal, learn skills for combating time blindness, learn how to make your to-do list more ADHD friendly, learn time blocking, and develop a healthier relationship with your ADHD. Get unstuck, get support, and connect with a community that you'll wonder how you ever lived without. Spots are limited, and there are only 2 registration events. And if you sign up at our first registration event on June 18th at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 Eastern, you can save $200. Can't make it or missed our event on the 18th? Your second chance registration is on June 26th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 Eastern. So if you are ready to turn insight into action, head over to coachingrewired.com and join us this summer. And let's do this together. Support for this podcast also comes from Adult Study Hall. Do you work for yourself? Are you an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, a student who has good intentions to get stuff done, but day after day, you're finding yourself doing everything other than what you know you need to be doing? Whatever you're trying to do, whether it's cleaning your home or your inbox, tackling dreaded tasks, laundry, phone calls, journaling, or even Zentangling, do it with us. And ADHD Rewired's very own virtual co-working membership community, Adult Study Hall, or we call it ASH for short, with a variety of different co-working sessions throughout the week, including many facilitated sessions we call ASH Plus, and an always open, quiet co-working space that we call ASH 24/7, where you can actually find me working on most days. Come join us at adultstudyhall.com. And don't forget about our monthly Pomodoro dance parties that I host just about every 4th Friday of the month at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 Eastern. Members of both Adult Study Hall and our coaching and alumni communities are invited to join me for 2 50-minute work cycles, with each work cycle concluding with a 10-minute high-energy dance party. Our next one is on Friday, May 23rd, 2025, and don't miss a special Pride Month queer-themed Pomodoro dance party on June 27th. Sign up today at adultstudyhall.com and get a 1-week risk-free free trial. Oh, and quick tip so you don't end up paying an ADHD tax. As soon as you actually start your free trial, go ahead and cancel your membership. You'll be able to stay in the community until your trial ends. This way, if you don't end up using it, you won't forget about it and get charged. And if you love it, you'll be motivated to re-sign up. Only $19.99 a month or $150 a year, which is a savings of 37% when you commit to the annual membership. But sorry, no prorated refunds will be issued if you cancel your annual membership early. Check us out at adultstudyhall.com. That's adultstudyhall.com. All right, we are back. So before we started recording, I was sharing with you that I think when we first spoke, I was sharing with you that I was exploring the possibility of I might also have autism, but I wasn't sure. And it's so funny too, because this has been 15 plus years in the making, or there are all these little things where it's just now I'm like, wow. From when I first started working with kids with autism, I was working with what would now be called level 3 high support needs.
Uh-huh.
And I just fell in love with it. I was like, there was this sort of innate understanding that I felt like I had. And so at the time I was like, wow, there's a lot of similarities between ADHD and autism, which is true.
Yes.
But there's also things that I think get attributed to ADHD that are actually very much autism.
Yeah, AuDHD is not nearly sitting up.
And I remember when I started my own clinical practice, and my focus was ADHD and autism. And I would do some evaluation of autism. And at the time it was Asperger's. I think I even used what was it called? It was a certain assessment that I got trained on how to do. And I was like, oh, I wonder how I would do on this. And I would be just below that threshold, right? I took some of the online quizzes and it was just below that threshold. But here's the thing that is very clear. So when you're taking an assessment that requires self-awareness, and part of autism is you might not be as aware as you think you are. And that's also true for ADHD, which is why we use other reporters with assessment. I had recently, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, there was a couple of things that were happening in short succession, and I'm a pattern seer. And so when I'm like, oh, wait, let me go back and take these assessments again. And I think that there were certain questions that years ago I answered differently because I had blind spots around them. And so I did these assessments again with some newer sort of self-awareness that I had gained. And it was whatever the range was, it was in the very high probability range. And I was like, oh, but this is an online assessment, even though it does say it's empirically validated. So I kept thinking about it. I was kind of looking more at it. And then I was reading a bunch of books. And I have read so many books written by people with autism years and years ago. And for some reason, I didn't quite see myself in any of that. But then I started looking at some of the stuff with, I guess, fresh eyes. And there was just a handful of things that was oh, wait. And then I got an ad fed to me on Facebook for this company called Prosper Health that does online autism assessments. And that literally the same day I was having it was a community event in my online community. And one of our members had shared that he just got diagnosed with autism. I knew he was also from Illinois, and he shared that he did it through this Prosper Health.
Oh.
And so I was like, that's twice that's coming up for me in a 24-hour period. Maybe I should look at that. And so I look at it, I'm like, instead of just, even though I've been shifting from this idea that, yes, you need an expert to do the evaluation who really understands the high masking, low support need, autistic traits, and looking at understanding the sort of the gatekeeping aspect of evaluation and how and so I've been shifting more towards self-diagnosis it's valid, right? And it's still part of my grad school training. I said, but no, it's not. Right. And I've been wanting to talk about it more on the podcast, but there's also this part of me that's, well, what if I'm wrong? And I'm just like, so
Yeah.
I think I need that piece of paper. And so I ended up making an appointment. Tomorrow, I actually have the sort of formal sort of report part of the evaluation. The evaluator, who's wonderful and also neurodivergent, which was also great.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Yes.
And I'm like, all right, so like clinician to clinician, like, what's your impression here? Like expecting he wasn't going to reveal what he was
Mhm.
thinking. Oh, but he did. And our next appointment will just be a formality.
Yeah.
But you don't need to wait 2 weeks between now and our next session for me to tell you, like, yes, like you absolutely meet the criteria for autism and ADHD.
Mm.
And it's just been an interesting sort of emotional process for me.
Yeah.
Because like even to this point, even when he told me that, still until I see the report, because I'm like, maybe he like goes back through his notes and he sees something that because actually maybe not. But what was so interesting to me is like when he was asking questions about like sensory things and
Yeah.
pet peeves. and and what became so clear is like even just talking about these things, it
Mhm.
feels like I'm in it, like in that
Mhm.
moment. And there was just so many different sort of aspects of it where I think back and reflect back to through a lot of my life and it's, oh, like, I think I've been missing a lot more social cues than I even ever realized. I was just figured, I don't know, I was just the ADHD spacey kid that was probably just missing cues because I wasn't paying attention. But it was more than that.
Yeah.
And that recognition, because I've talked a little bit about this in sort of vague generalities on the podcast, but I have, in the last handful of years, I've had some professional relationships that have soured. And it's because, like, I was an accidental asshole. And I like that term because it's just,
Yeah. It
yeah,
wasn't intentional.
I get it. Like, the way I came off was like not, didn't feel good. And I get that now, understanding that, but I was oblivious to it. And so it's like this looking at all the patterns and going, oh my gosh, it wasn't just that for years, I'm like, yeah, I relate to a lot of autistic traits. And I remember reading this article, the study in the Journal of Attention Disorders many years ago, talking about that when for adults with autism, the rate of autistic traits, not necessarily autism diagnosed, but traits,
Mhm.
real high. And I was like, this validates my like hypothesis that there's all this, and it's been autism all along. And I think the thing for me that's been like the most like, ego bruising is, and I've worked with a number of ADHDers who are also professional, like mental health professionals and coaches
Yep.
who work with and specialize with ADHD and didn't think they had ADHD. And I was like, you clearly have ADHD. Do you really not think you have ADHD? And just being
Yes.
like, how could these people be working with this population and think they don't have ADHD? And now I'm like, oh shit. Like I presented on autism. I like that was part of my clinical specialty, but that wasn't me. I just relate a little bit to it. I have a son with autism. That's, so here's the official reveal. I'm absolutely AuDHD.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like half the listeners out there are going, really? You needed to go through all that to figure that out? Because it was obvious to most of us already. Actually, there was someone in my community I was telling this to, and she was like, I remember you talking about your auditory sensitivities and how neurotic you are with sounds. And I was like, I thought you knew you had autism. I was like, wait, what?
They say that sensory sensitivities are also an ADHD trait. So why would I? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but and I should
Yeah.
say, I think it's the most untalked about ADHD trait.
Yeah.
Maybe it's untalked about because it's not an ADHD trait and it's an autism trait. Maybe. I think we just need more research on.
We just need more
Yeah.
research. I don't know. I think that the two conditions are 100% related. They both have like bottom up neural processing as a foundational quality. And I think that from my work, that is probably the most significant thing that puts them together in a category as opposed to separate. And if we were to consider it in terms of bottom up versus top down neural processing, I think we would find a lot of the things that don't make sense.
Will you
Make
explain just for
sense.
listeners what that means, bottom up versus,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know I was autistic. I kept wondering. I didn't know why I wasn't, but I didn't know that I was. I did know that everybody else was crazy. I studied them. And yeah, like when I was doing my assessment and they're like, oh, they will echolalia and they'll copy TV shows and things like that as a way to have conversations. And I was like, I don't do that. I learned to talk the normal way from Buffy the Vampire Slayer at Gilmore Girls.
Oh, I want to say something about echolalia. It's a book I was recently listening to. I don't remember what book it was, but they were talking about that echolalia can also be like an internal echolalia that doesn't actually come out. And I was like, God damn it. Because I've been doing that my whole life.
Time.
Someone says something and I echo it in my mind all the time. Like,
oh, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was repeating what you just said.
Clearly, I'm still processing this diagnosis. So thanks for processing with me.
It's totally fine. It took me several months to even get to the point where I knew what I thought about my diagnostic sessions because they were bad. That's a whole other story. But the neural processing. So I studied how people, this is my PhD research, how people get invested in stories, symbols, and ideas that are not in their own best interests. Because I thought that was so weird. And what I was looking at when I was studying cognition and memory and trauma and storytelling and myth was top-down neural processing, so general to specific, where basically you get these like typical baby brain development. Babies are born with more active synapses than they actually need. And in typical development, they self-prune and they keep the ones that are going to be relevant for their life. So it's a combination of nature and nurture because like mom's voice is important. Okay, the sound of the air conditioner is not. That's the example I use most of. And so what they do though is they optimize for efficiency. So they have categories of things. And if you look at the psychological research on like taxonomy and stereotypes, you'll see this laid out where, because I actually was going to do a TED Ed lesson on stereotypes and the pitch was accepted. And then when I submitted like the script, they were like, no, you ignored all of this research on stereotype, like on the general to specific neural processing. And I read it and I was like, this is crazy. Nobody thinks like this.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
With the progress, I was like, this is why people are great. This is why everyone's all messed up. They think they're optimizing for efficiency and they're coming up with categories and then they're evaluating based on the categories. So it was like, bottom-up neural processing optimizes for accuracy. So it's not efficient at all. And those baby brains don't self-prune in the same way. So they aren't saying these are the important things. These are the unimportant things, like reinforce this, de-emphasize that. Instead, it's all just noise. And they're evaluated. You got to run through the process on everything. So that's when you're like I use this example of the air conditioner so often, but is the change in the sound of the air conditioner like a sign we're all going to die? Because your animal brain is trying to figure out, like, is something a threat to your survival? So your human brain may be like, it is highly unlikely that the air conditioner is going to be a life or death thing. But the part of your brain that's running the initial analysis is not your upper, like your cognition. It's that part of you that's just, is it a threat? So like we walk around constantly in fight or flight, and we're getting activated by everything. And we're wasting tons of energy because we're evaluating like normal sounds that we hear every day and sights and things like that. Routines are a tremendous coping strategy. They're a really smart coping strategy when you're like for not having to waste that cognitive energy on, if I don't have to think about what's for breakfast, then I can use that. Yeah, I see your face.
Yes, I have had oatmeal for the last probably like 70 breakfasts in a row.
I get up and I do the exact same thing. If I don't do the exact same thing, like in the order that I do it, I'm going to forget my meds for the day, or I'm going to walk around and wonder why my dog is following me from room to room, whining. And I'm like, I didn't feed you. If I get out of order, because I can connect, it's that like habit linking. I can connect one thing to the next to get something done, but it's always manual. Like it's never automatic. It's always, I just know the order that I'm supposed to do things, so I do the next thing. I used to do these habit change challenges, and I would try something new for 30 days to try and make it a habit, and they never worked, and I did not understand why. But they don't work because my brain's not automating. My brain just doesn't do that. It is constantly going from the specific to the general, which is really good when you have to reconsider your beliefs or when you need to take in new information and adjust your overall thinking. That's great. That's a really wonderful skill. But it's not great when you just have to get up, go to work, do the same thing, leave every day. And because a lot of us learn that we're supposed to be able to do that to automate, we substitute like really rigid rules without the flexibility that general to specific neural processors have, where they only follow those rules sometimes. They have some kind of magic code book that tells them when they're supposed to follow them and when they're not supposed to follow them. I don't have that code book. I can either do it all the time or I can consider each case individually. And I don't understand how you could just do unless there is a rubric, like if there was a logic tree, I can. And I made a logic tree,
Of
like
course
when
you
I
did.
first got diagnosed, I was like, oh, here's a helpful logic tree for all my friends. Or am I trying to be an asshole? I was like, so like, I'm probably not. But did I say this? Oh, then maybe I'm wrong. And I did this logic tree and I said, oh, banged the mic. Look, now you know how to understand me. Isn't that wonderful? And nobody really said anything.
Was it just like blank stares and, okay, I'll just back away quietly?
The hysterical thing is I had clocked so many of my friends as autistic and never clocked, and been like, oh, I'm just friends with a lot of autistic people that don't know they're autistic.
Yeah.
Not realizing, that self-awareness and the blind spots.
It's interesting. The more I interact with people who have been diagnosed with both and know that they've been diagnosed with both, there's like a deeper relating and knowing. I remember at last year's ADHD conference, I spent some time with a group of AuDHDers. And I love these conferences because it's around my people. But as great as that feeling is to be around like other ADHDers, when I was intentionally around other AuDHDers, it was even a deeper like relating. And it was a comfort.
Yeah.
In that.
I find that to be true. I've done studies and neurotypical people, when they interact with autistic people, they do this kind of split-second judgment. And there's something about the way that we move our bodies that or exist in space. We don't make the right expressions. I don't know what it is, but there's some way that they can tell, because they will flock the autistic person in the room and avoid them. Like they won't sit with us at lunch. I'm like, wow, that matches my middle school experience. Strangely.
You're not the only one.
Yeah. But when you think about that, I think that like the level of peace that, I've experienced that too with other AuDHD people. I'm much more comfortable with autistic or ADHD people than I am with like neurotypical people.
It's okay.
We get really anxious.
You can say normies on the show.
Normies. I'm very uncomfortable with the normies. I don't know, like I'm always very self-conscious about my body. Like, where's my body in space? Am I holding my hand correctly?
Which eye am I supposed to be looking at?
I told my youngest niece, I was like, oh, they want you to look at people her parents were saying, look at people's faces when you talk to them. And I was like, oh, I can tell you how to fake eye contact. Don't worry about that. Before diagnosis.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I stare at their hairline. No one will know. On the hairline, because if they jerk their eyes up, you could make accidental eye contact, and then what do you do?
But now you need the exception rule for people like me whose hairline goes to the back of their head.
Top of your head.
Top that. Imagine where I once had hair. That's where to look. Or look at the eyebrows.
Yeah. Eyebrows are too close to the eyes. Danger will happen.
Oh, interesting.
You gotta go above.
So does that make you kind of anxious looking at eyebrows? Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because the thing was, I was always like, I can make eye contact.
That's how I thought too.
Like, I can totally do that. Then I did some more in-depth reading, and I was like, oh, it's an abnormal, you're either not making any eye contact or you're making disturbingly direct eye contact. And I was like, that's why all these people have thought I was flirting with them.
Oh, interesting.
For all of these years. because I have been trying to be respectful and they've been thinking I'm making some kind of weird eye game thing going on. And then I get totally confused. I was just looking at you. Why are you doing these things with your face or your body? So, but that is, and I also noticed that several of my friends who I had clocked as like undiagnosed would also make disturbingly direct eye contact. Like we take it really literally. I think that the normies,
we love them too. We love our normies. Yeah.
I think they look away without ever, like in some kind of way, they have their secret code book. But we either are not looking because, dude, if my dog looked another dog in the eyes, he'd be challenging him to a death match. Like, it's not normal for mammals to stare into each other's eyes. But if we look directly at them, then they think we're communicating something really deep. I'm like, no, I just don't know what to do.
Do you have a hard time, like a table with a group of people, like say at a restaurant or something, and you're in the middle and you have to do full like body shifts from like right to left to be able to include people in? I struggle with that big time.
It's like a choreographed dance.
Okay.
You must move your body this way. And obviously I'm moving away from the mic when I do that. Move your body this way and then center and then in the other direction and then pause and then center again. And that's lots
so it's totally intuitive and natural. No thinking involved at all.
Yeah. I come from a very social family. And the joke was like, in my family, I was the introvert, but nobody knew like externally because we were everywhere. And my dad and my mom are both super social. And so are my siblings. So I was the weird one coming along. I always had a book with me. I could ignore you from anywhere in the world and frequently did. But I knew how to do the human thing. Like I knew how to make your face do the thing. And I would sometimes practice in the mirror because I was like, but I see it on TV that people practice in the mirror. So it's okay. Because that's normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the mental cartwheels to try and figure out, like, if I had a feeling and I couldn't figure out how to make myself stop feeling that thing, then I would think about people on TV who had that who seemed to have that feeling. What did they do? And so, like, at one point in my 20s, I was sitting in the shower, fully clothed, like with my knees drawn up, because I'd seen it in the movie Say Anything. Her dad had done it in that movie when his whole life's falling apart. And I was like, my whole life is falling apart. Maybe this will make me feel better. And I got in the shower, I sat down, I pulled my knees in, and I did not feel better. But I stayed for I gave it like 10, 15 minutes just in case. Like,
you gave it the good college try.
I was like, maybe sometimes it works. Nope, not feeling better.
Oh,
and like
man.
later, like I can tell that story and know exactly how ridiculous it is, hindsight. But my real-time processing, it's not at the same level as my delayed processing.
Here's what I want to do. So we're like almost at the hour mark.
Yeah.
And how were you on time? So
I am okay. As long as my kids don't destroy the upstairs.
Okay. So let's cross our fingers for that.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this up. And then let's do a part 2 that we're actually going to record right now.
Yes.
But we'll wrap this up for right now. And then we'll do a part 2 that'll come out maybe a few days later. How's that sound?
All right. That sounds fine.
All right. So we're going to bring this episode here to an end. So you were going to come on. We were going to talk about technology and, you know, how autistic of us to just talk about our special interest currently of autism. Huh.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to wrap this one up and then we'll have a part 2 coming out maybe next week. I'm making no time commitments right now to when the releases are on my podcast, and I'm okay with this. Hopefully all the listeners are too. Shannon, thank you so much. Really quick, leave your contact information where people can find out more about you.
If they go to autisticselfreliance.org, that's my nonprofit, or itiassist.com. That's our for-profit, and I guess we'll talk about those in the next episode. And then on LinkedIn, and that's probably the easiest way. Like, you find me, I don't use the other socials very much, but it's just Shannon, Shannan, Palma, Palma, and my, like, cover photo has the logos for ITI and ASRs. Makes it easy.
Awesome. And we'll link all of that in the show notes for this episode. Hey, look at you. You made it till the end. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, learned something new, had a big aha or a reha, that aha that you definitely had before, please consider leaving a rating and review on your podcast app, sharing this episode with someone you know who might benefit from it, or on your social media channels, your in-person or online support groups, your therapist, your doctor, your coach, your hairstylist, whoever you think would benefit from it. And if you loved it, consider becoming a patron. Patrons at $25 a month or more can also join me every fourth Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 Eastern, for a small group coaching call on Zoom. To become a patron and support this work, go to patreon.com/ADHD Rewired. And I'll be back for another episode as soon as I'm able. So make sure you hit subscribe or follow on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. And I'll leave you with this. As scary and overwhelming as things may feel, whether it's personal or political, whether you're struggling to find hope, try to remember that hope isn't passive. It's rebellious. Every act of kindness, every boundary we hold, every voice that refuses to stay silent is hope in action. And hope isn't just something we feel, it's something we do together, over and over and over again. And yes, sometimes it's hard as hell, but never doubt that together we can do hard things. Until next time.